D Lane, as always, where I get to talk about everything that I normally don't get to talk about on my regular sports podcast, Barbershop Sports Talk, which you guys can all find on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasting apps or platforms from. Just want to apologize to everybody. So did not do Outside the Shop at all last week. Was just taking a little bit of a refresher, a little bit of a break, but we're getting that going on again. So we're going to be doing this little 10, 15-minute program throughout the months without any breaks. Same with Barbershop Sports, on my regular podcast. I know I was slacking a little bit on that too. So those two things are definitely going to be back and better than ever. So also, thank you everybody who's tuning in, whether it's via Twitter/Periscope, YouTube Live, or Facebook Live. And also, I do want to say this. Check out the podcast that I just released it today. I had my guy Silas Garrison on. We delved into the NFL draft, NFL trade talk with Carson Wentz, getting traded to the Colts, as well as Deshaun Watson. Rumors swirling around him potentially going to the Panthers. And at the end, we dive into LeBron, because Silas always loves himself some LeBron. So here's what we have on the agenda for today. Mac Jones versus Tua. Who was actually better? Damian Lillard and CJ, they stick up for a former assistant coach of theirs who they respect. Boston, just not good enough. And Kyle Pitts. And also something we're going to be doing is every day we're going to be diving into one NFL draft prospect. I've been watching a lot of old college football games as we're kind of preparing to talk about the NFL draft. So I'm going to be doing that every week and every day. And I'm going to dive into one NFL prospect coming into the draft and just some of the teams that could use them and what makes that prospect special. So let's start with this. So DeVonta Smith. He stated today that he would take Mac Jones over Tua. Now, I think at first people might be like, oh my God, Tua was better, because obviously Tua was a more spectacular thrower. So people might think DeVonta Smith is crazy. And people might also say this, and this is true, that DeVonta Smith, the biggest success DeVonta ever had as a wide receiver was with Mac Jones. It wasn't with Tua. So you could say that there's a little bit of bias in this situation. But here's what I'm going to say. Every quarterback does well at Alabama. Greg McElroy did good at Alabama. A.J. McCarron did good. Then we see the evolution. We see them go from a Jay Coker to a Jalen Hurts, right, who was a second-round pick in the NFL, to a Tagovailoa, who was a first-round pick. And it seems like Mac Jones is going to be a first- or second-round pick in the upcoming NFL draft. If you look at their stats, it's not all that different. Mac Jones, and I'm going to compare Mac Jones this year to Tua, his first full year starting. So this will be Tua's sophomore year versus Mac Jones's redshirt junior year. Mac Jones, he threw for more yards, over 4,000. Tua was nowhere close to 4,000. 41 touchdown passes for Mac Jones, about 4 ahead of Tua. Tua had 37. Same amount of interceptions. Mac Jones's completion percentage was 77%. Tua's completion percentage was 67%. Mac Jones's passer rating was 203. Tua Tagovailoa's passer rating was 202. So Mac Jones was a better quarterback all across the board. And also, I will say this, because people might say, oh, look at the talent. This was the best Alabama team ever. If you look at the offense, yes, Mac Jones had DeVonta Smith, but Jalen Waddle was hurt for most of the season. Tua had DeVonta Smith. He had Jalen Waddle. He had Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs. Tua had more offensive power, offensive talent. Also that year, just winning aside, Mac Jones did not lose a game as a starter. They ran the table. Mac Jones didn't really have any bad games. Tua had a couple here or there games, and they ended up getting blown out by Clemson in the national championship. That was the culmination of Tua's season that year. So Mac Jones versus Tua, it's not as big of a gap as you would think. I'd probably still say maybe Tua is a better prospect, but I don't think there's that much of a difference. I really don't. I get why Devontae has a credible case for saying he's team Tua, and it's more than just that's his guy, that's his teammate. Cam Newton, he was arguing, and this kind of came out over the weekend. People are talking about it now. Cam Newton, he was arguing with like a 15-year-old at his football camp. It got heated. I guess the kid called him old. I think he said some profanities at him, and it just kind of made me think, like, crazy kids these days. And I just want to tell a really funny story that I thought about this. Because I think people were kind of talking about what would their parents have done. And I remember, I think I was probably like in first or second grade when this was happening. My grandma made me do tap dancing lessons. I remember I hated it. And I remember one day I got into an argument with the tap dancing teacher, and it got a little verbal. And I think I said, like, you can't make me do this or whatever. She took me out to my grandma. My grandma like kind of beat me up in front of everybody. So that was kind of embarrassing. But it was just kind of like, this kid goes to Cam's camp, and then he disrespects Cam at his camp. To me, that is mind-blowing. You pay to go to this camp for a quarterback that's been in the NFL, that's made a lot of money, that was an MVP of this league, right? That is somebody hopefully you want to aspire to be, and you're talking crap to him. I just don't get that. So Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum, they call out the Minnesota Timberwolves, who just fired their head coach, and they called them out for not hiring David Van Trell. For those of you who do not know David Van Trell, he is the associate head coach. He's an associate head coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves, I believe. And Chris Finch, who was hired, is going to be the new coach. He was an assistant head coach for the Toronto Raptors. Here's what Damian Lillard said. I don't want to read the whole tweet, but he said David Van Poole, and he's right there on the bench. He's been in the front office successfully and on the front of the bench of a winning team successfully for 7 years, and has also played a major role in the development of a dominant backcourt as he was with CJ and Dame in Portland. And CJ kind of coincided saying it makes sense respectfully. This is something the NBA has to come to terms with. I think it's interesting. I think it is a little weird that he was not even given a look, given that he's right on the bench and he's the associate coach. I think that is slightly a little concerning, but it is the team's choice at the end of the day to hire who they want to hire. So the Boston Celtics, they've been 4-6 in their last 10 games. They lost to the New Orleans Pelicans, who came back on them. It has not been really good for Boston. And here's a simple thing I'll say with Boston. A lot of people have been talking about what's the issue with Boston. It's quite simple. It's very simple. Boston isn't good enough. If you look at the best players in this league, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Joel Embiid, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Luka Doncic, Damian Lillard, we get all the way to 10, 12, 13 guys, and we're not naming Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown. That's why they're not, as good. That's why they're like 5th or 6th or 4th, something like that in the Eastern Conference. They don't have one of the top 10 to 12 players in the NBA, right? And they could have had a guy like that in Kyrie, but he bounced, see what it want to be, and now he's with the Brooklyn Nets. And that's quite frankly why that a team that we see like the Boston Celtics, they're not doing as good. It's not Brad Stevens' fault. It's not that they maybe need more pieces. It's that their horses, their top-tier guys, they're not at that level. They're just not. And that's just the name of the game. Joe Johnson, who was a really good player in the NBA for years, it was him, Al Horford, and Josh Smith. They were really good. But you know why they couldn't beat the Cavs, why they couldn't beat the Boston Celtics, why they couldn't beat the Orlando Magic? Because those teams had LeBron James, Dwight Howard, Kevin Garnett, Rajon Rondo, Ray Allen, and Paul Pierce. It's just that simple, just the way it works. Sometimes your players just aren't good enough. Sometimes the horses aren't good enough. Sometimes it's not a lack of effort, a lack of trying, lack of coaching. You're just not good enough. If anybody's ever played sports, you can understand that. And lastly, for the NFL draft, the prospect I'm going to get into is Kyle Pitts, tight end out of Florida. I love Kyle Pitts. He is my favorite player in this draft. I'm also going to be coming out with like a big board soon. Kyle Pitts is going to be top 5 on my big board. I love Kyle Pitts. He can play outside receiver as a tight end. He can play inside receiver. He can play in the slot. He can play traditional tight end. He can also be an H-back in the backfield. He can do everything on the field, and he can block. You can pull him in the run game. He can block down. He can also block in the pass game. Like, can do everything. To me, he has no weaknesses. He's explosive, fast, twitchy, strong, really great prospect, can run every route, makes tough catches, and did this all in the SEC, the Southeastern Conference, the toughest conference in college football. I love Pitts to death. When I think of Kyle Pitts, I think of a Travis Kelce, guys like that. I think Pitts is going to be a guy that if you have an offensive coordinator, you can line him up at H-back, give him 10 carries one game, and then one game you're going to say, hey, we're just going to need you to block this game, and then the next game, hey, we're going to line you up out on the outside. We're going to throw you 10 balls. Like Kyle Pitts, he's going to be a chess piece that you can move around. So don't think of him as a tight end. Just think of him as a offensive weapon. But Kyle Pitts is special. I love him. Whoever gets him is going to get an extraordinary player. And some teams, the Buffalo Bills, I think the Buffalo Bills should go up and get a Kyle Pitts. I think that'd be really good for them to have him as their second option to Stephon Diggs. I think that'd also be great for Josh Allen's development. The Atlanta Falcons, I think they could use him. The Jacksonville Jaguars, Philadelphia Eagles, and the New England Patriots. These are some teams that I thought of that could definitely use an elite star tight end. So that's all we have for this edition of Outside the Shop with me, your host, Daryl D. Lane. Like I said, check out the sports podcast, Barbershop Sports Talk on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, the whole deal there. And I talked to my friend Silas Garrison. We talked about the draft. He's not really sold on Devontae Smith. He'll explain to you why. We also delve into the NBA, who's the biggest threat to the Los Angeles Lakers, and we delve into the NFL with the Carson Wentz trade and Deshaun Watson trade rumors still going on. And subscribe to the YouTube channel, Daryl Lane, and you will find clips from my podcast on there and this show on there as well. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Have a great day.